at least you're meeting with me. Rather than do that. I don't know why I put 8 appointments out tomorrow. I've got other stuff on. There you go.
Two months ago. Yeah, they said they did it. Yes. Trying to pull up this thing. Just funny thing here. Yeah. Well, I was trying. Okay, no, that's okay. It's good because I pulled it up and then it just went black on me and then, yeah. No. Yeah. No, that's fine.
I just want to make sure. I saw you looking around.
No, yeah. We're good. Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting of the City of Bloomington to order, council to order. And Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Councilmember Grant.
Here.
Councilmember Bolin.
Here.
Councilmember Motney.
Here.
Councilmember Emig.
Present.
Councilmember Becker.
Here.
Councilmember Urban.
Here.
Councilmember Ward.
Here.
Councilmember Crable.
Here.
Councilmember Crumpler.
Here.
Mayor Millawamble.
Here. And next on the agenda is public comment. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment?
We received no emailed public comment, nor did anyone register to speak remote or in person.
Okay. Next, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. And is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councilmember Crable and then seconded by Councilmember Emig. Are we doing voice?
Yes.
Okay.
Councilmember Grant.
Here.
Councilmember
Yes,
Bol.
present. Yes, whatever.
All the things. Okay.
All
Councilmember Bolin.
Yes.
Councilmember Motney.
Yes.
Councilmember Emig.
Yes.
Councilmember Becker.
Yes.
Councilmember Urban.
Yes.
Councilmember Ward.
Aye.
Councilmember Crable.
Yes.
Councilmember Crumpler.
Yes. Okay, awesome. Next item on the agenda is a the regular agenda, a presentation and discussion of the Public Safety and Community Relations Board annual report as requested by the Administration Department. And I'm going to turn it over to City Manager Gleason for some introductory remarks before the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight, we will have the PSCRB annual report by Dr. Farmer. But I also want to give Michael Hurt and possibly Assistant Chief Wamsley and you, Chief Symington, any comments in advance to the report. Okay, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. And
All right.
you had asked to go last, and in fact, you are.
First and last, right?
So there you go.
All right, thank you. So as mentioned, I'm the chair of the Public Safety and Community Relations Board, and I'm here to give you our annual report for the year 2022. So I will just be covering a summary of the activities of the board starting in January 2022. I will cover review of our meeting dates, presentations to and feedback from the community, a report on the complaints that we have received, and action items. So first, a review of our monthly and quarterly meeting dates. The PSCRB has established monthly meetings for the first Thursday of each month, and quarterly meetings are scheduled for the first Thursday of each quarter. Our meeting location primarily is Miller Park Pavilion, and if we have other meeting locations due to scheduling conflicts, those are announced on the agendas. Presentations to and feedback from the community. Monthly meetings include reports from Bloomington Police Department on the number of complaints received in the previous month, year to date, and those pending investigation, as well as a detailed taser report. And this includes all instances in which a taser was displayed or deployed and a description of that incident. Future meeting dates, locations, and pending discussion items are also discussed. The Bloomington Police Department reported that for 2022, there were 21 total complaints received. This is compared to 32 complaints in 2021 and 22 complaints in 2020. Our topics at meetings included, and I'm just going to list them off here, our appointment and introduction of youth board members, training and recruitment updates for Bloomington police officers, taser and use of force reports from BPD. We were presented with BPD's new strategic plan. We went over a review of the board rules and the role of the PSCRB. Also the PSCRB goals as they relate to community outreach and engagement. The complaint review process. We discussed traffic stop data from the Illinois Department of Transportation and racial disparities in traffic stops and got updates from BPD on those and reports. The Flock system automated license plate readers, updates and data reports on that. We had a presentation from school resource officers and their role in schools. We had an overview of the BPD transparency portal. We also discussed new BPD programs such as text to tip and lights on. We had a discussion on the guidelines on the use of recreational marijuana in Illinois. And of course, feedback and questions from the community are received by the board and actions taken from those suggestions. To review complaints or a report on reviewed complaints, we received 3 requests for review in 2022 through the City Legal Department. First, case number 2019 R02. This request was received in April 2022. It had already been appealed previously, so the previous review by the board stood. But in this case, the complainant had not received a notice that an initial citation had been voided by the issuing police officer, so they were unable to give that notice in person. The PSCRB is charged with reviewing whether or not police personnel followed procedure. So in this case, the PSCRB determined that BPD followed its protocols when conducting this internal investigation. To address this type of situation in the future, the board did approve a recommendation that a policy be implemented to ensure that in the rare circumstance where immediate notice of a voided citation cannot be given, a written follow-up notice is sent by the police department. Since that time, as I mentioned, this complaint was appealed again. And so since that time, BPD has implemented that policy. Case number 2021 R03. This request was received in July 2022. The complaint stemmed from a trespassing incident in which the complainant was removed from a property and believed this was unlawful. In reviewing this case, the PSCRB determined that the Bloomington Police Department followed its protocols when conducting the internal investigation. The board members asked several questions of the police department in conducting its review, including asking for follow-up information to ensure that the police department came to the correct conclusion. And board members determined those charged with reviewing the complaint did a thorough job and determined proper protocols were followed. Case number 2021 R02, the board received this request in October 2022. The complainant in this case had been questioned by a police officer and filed a complaint because they believed information they had provided police would affect sentencing. In this case, again, the PSCRB determined that Bloomington Police Department followed its protocols when conducting the internal investigation. On action items, number one, youth board members update. Both youth member positions on the board have been filled. These are one-year appointments with reappointments possible. So Ms. Kimberly Howard was appointed in July 2022, and Ms. Amira Harris-Bomarito was appointed in December 2022. Second, the biannual review of complaints filed by PSCRB. So as part of the ongoing community outreach and education efforts by the board, the Bloomington Police Department provides for the PSCRB a compilation of all complaints filed to date, at least twice a year, excluding those that are set for or awaiting adjudication or those that can still be appealed to the PSCRB. In 2022, we reviewed complaints that had been filed to date on 3 occasions. This provided the board an opportunity to ask questions about policy and procedure at BPD and provide clarification to better understand those policies so all board members have a more comprehensive understanding of police procedures that pertain to citizen interactions. 3, racial disparities in traffic stops update. Data compiled by the Illinois Department of Transportation in 2020 concluded that Bloomington Police Department stopped Black drivers 7 times more compared to white drivers. Discussions and updates have continued with BPD providing information as requested to the PSCRB regarding disparities in traffic stops with data collected by BPD that provides information on current rates. 4, the Flock System automated license plate readers update. In February 2022, a special meeting was called for the PSCRB to hear from the public and discuss BPD's acquisition of 10 automated license plate readers. The PSCRB sent a motion to the City Council, approved by all members present, that the police department's policy should include how information will be shared externally for auditing for better public accountability and transparency. Noted there were concerns from the community and suggested more discussions and open forums if and when the contract was up for extension or renewal, and noted that the PSCRB approved of the cameras as a crime-solving tool, not for crime reduction. These changes were made to the policy by BPD, and throughout 2022, BPD has provided regular updates on the ALPR data. This data is available in the transparency portal. For instance, when questions arose as to how the data was compiled, BPD representatives attended PSCRB meetings to explain what that data means. Updates are now given on a regular basis to highlight how ALPRs are being used. 5, overview on the BPD transparency portal. PSCRB members discussed information available on the transparency portal and how this information could be accessed and interpreted. Information on the portal includes the current strategic plan, traffic stop data from 2016 to 2021, and pedestrian stop data from those years as well. Policies and procedures, crime statistics, and an interactive police activity map, a link to submit FOIA requests, ALPR data, and a link to the PSCRB webpage. Members can direct others in the community to the transparency portal if they have any specific questions about policies or data collected by BPD. And lastly, in memory of Reverend Dr. Bridget Black, we would also just like to take a moment to acknowledge Reverend Dr. Black's service to the board and the broader Bloomington community and beyond. Reverend Dr. Black was very involved in service to her community, was an advocate for others, and made considerable contributions during her time on the board to us and to others. Thank you. So that concludes the annual report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, council question. Councilmember Craybill.
Sure. Thanks, Ashley. And just want to say I really appreciate all the board members and how you take your job seriously. I think that goes to show there's 5 members. Am I missing somebody here tonight? And that shows dedication as well. I've gone to a number of your meetings and there's always good questions asked. Want to thank Assistant Chief Walmsley and Chief Symington. Assistant Chief Walmsley is, I think, always at the meetings, providing the data requested. And the Chief Symington is there on what seems to be a regular basis. And there is a good relationship between the board and the police department. That wouldn't have to be the case, but it is. So I think So that's something I appreciate. I appreciate you acknowledging Dr. Black and all that she's done. And if you could explain, because one of your charges is to educate the community on the avenues available for residents to make complaints. And if you could explain that for us and then for the community, and the complaints, what you do and you don't do, what you look at, what you don't look at.
Sure. So according to the BPD webpage, if someone is interested in filing a complaint and it's in the moment, they could ask for a supervisor. And if things cannot be resolved in a discussion with a supervisor, then they can ask to fill out a citizen complaint form. That's not required, obviously. Someone can decide to file a complaint at a later date, and they can access the citizen complaint forms on the webpage, or they can go in person to the front desk or lobby at BPD to get a complaint form. That form just includes some basic contact information as well as a description of the incident and officers, if they are known, that they are filing the complaint against. So then it has to be a notarized sworn affidavit that is taken. It can be mailed in as well, notarized and mailed in. And there's an address listed on the webpage as well. And then once that's received, they will be contacted by the Office of Professional Standards. And at that point, Bloomington Police Department and the Office of Professional Standards will do their investigation into the complaint. And then our role with the PSCRB is if someone is not satisfied with the outcome of that complaint. So BPD investigates it and it's, let's say unfounded, sustained, et cetera. If they are not happy with the outcome, they can appeal within 30 days of receiving the notice. They can appeal to the PSCRB. Now, our role is just to examine whether or not police followed policy and procedure. So a lot of our questions pertain to what are the existing policies and procedures you have for these specific things, and then address whether or not we believe BPD followed policy and procedure.
Following up, and when you say policy and procedure, that's the policy and procedure for the investigation by the department. Would that be correct?
That, as well as, if there's any other policies pertaining to an incident, right? So how do police normally deal with XYZ type of incident that was involved, right? Depending on what the complaint actually is.
Okay. If you could give a little more detail, you talked about the racial disparities and traffic stops and how you've worked, with the department, specifically with Chief Symington about changing what the department does. And I believe there's been a reduction based on information provided by the department. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, that's fair to say. So I think this started at the quarterly meeting in December of 2021, actually, where this was discussed at length. And then we were notified then, Chief Symington was present at that meeting and told us that they had started to collect their own data at Bloomington Police Department to address this issue. And so we have occasionally requested and received updates on that, and it is less than 7, the disparity. A disparity still exists, but it's much less than it was.
Thank you. And one last thing, what else do you think the PSCRB could be doing? Specifically with regard to your bylaws on analyzing data and making recommendations to BPD, what else do you think the PSRB could do? And just kind of throwing this out there, maybe something you could do with the Stevenson Center?
Maybe, I will say that any data that we've requested from Bloomington Police Department, they've been happy to provide us. So that's a great thing. To answer your question, I suppose I would say, what does the community want us to do, right? I think that's a big factor in this. Part of the reason why we started discussing racial disparities in traffic stops at length was because community members came to meetings and they were involved and asking questions. So I would just say, if the community has any specifics, they could contact anyone on the board, myself, request that we discuss something at a meeting. Of course, at the quarterly meetings, we have open discussion about anything. So that's a time to raise questions as well. And, certainly we could bring those things onto the agenda as needed, always.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Councilmember Crumpler, and then Bolin.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Ashley. Thanks for coming before us this evening. It's great to see you. One thing I hear all the time is we have all these speeders in my neighborhood out in Ward 9 and along along Twanda Barnes. And I support traffic stops, and I know folks in Ward 9 would love to see more out there. Anyway, just to sort of follow up on what Councilmember Crable was talking about, in the item number 3, the racial disparity, it sounds like the ratio has gone down, which is great. In your discussions with the Bloomington Police Department, I wonder if you might be able to provide some specific examples about what actions maybe have been taken or what others might be, implemented, to continue to lower that ratio.
Well, I think, and certainly anyone can interrupt me if I'm incorrect, Assistant Chief Wamsley or Chief Symington. But I think what in regards to collecting data, it's more of, I guess you could say, an instantaneous collection of data with these traffic stops, whereas with the IDOT data, that's not released until the following year. So you get the IDOT data and it says, oh, there's Black people are 7 times more likely to be pulled over by police. Well, a long time has passed since that data was collected. So one of the benefits of how BPD is collecting data is that it's like real-time updates. And so we know that when we say, okay, well, now the disparity is just 4 times more likely or 2 times more likely, we know that that's current. So those are sort of the updates we receive. And the second part of your question as to what else could be done, I think that as of right now, we want, and when we discussed this initially in December of 2021, there was a sense that more data would be helpful in addressing these questions. And so as such, as we saw data come in, do we see it trending downwards, for example? And if we see it trending downwards, then we know that something is working. If we see it going in the opposite direction, and once again, we see 6, 7 times, et cetera, in disparities, then we know, right, maybe this isn't working so well anymore. So I guess more directly to answer your question, as long as it's trending downwards and we're seeing that trend, because of course they're not going to get rid of a disparity instantaneously. Yeah.
Okay. And then maybe, is there anything specific that the officers are doing that might be, that would lead to that lowering of the ratio that maybe this is a question for Chief Symington, specific practices that the Bloomington police officers are undertaking that's helping lower that disparity?
Yeah, that's probably a question for Chief Symington.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Were you intending for the chief to come up?
Only if he wants to.
Your call.
I certainly wasn't, I could speak with him separately, but if he has a few minutes, that would be great.
Well, I think it'd be helpful for the community to hear. So if you want to come up, that'd be great.
Thank you, Doctor. Good evening, Mayor, City Manager, Deputy City Manager, and Council. The Bloomington Police Department currently uses a dashboard system that is live as officers enter their stop card data after a traffic stop, which is required by policy and state law. That information is then uploaded fairly quickly into the system. And the supervisors are allowed or able to monitor that on a daily basis. So they use that as a coaching tool for the individual officers. That is also what coincides with some of the training the officers have been receiving. We are really onboarding a new group of young officers. And so they're coming into the system being well informed of the data that is unique to that individual officer on that shift at the shift level. And so the continuous coaching has been a difference maker. The officers, their supervisors have that tool readily available, and it has allowed us to drive those numbers down substantially.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you. Councilmember Bolin, and then Ward and Emig.
Yeah, I just have a few comments. I do really appreciate the board, and I see at least 3 people that have been on it from the beginning, so there's quite a bit of dedication there. And I also appreciate that you put the link to the police transparency portal in the report, because it just makes it easy for the public to go there and find out some information. What I noticed specifically, it does have a lot of data and trends, which I think is important to follow, like you mentioned. And I specifically, one of the things I noticed was that all but one of the current shootings or recent shooting activity, all but one has been apprehended. And this is, in my opinion, removal of perpetrators and their guns out of the public space is very valuable as a violence reduction tool. So I really appreciate that also. And the last thing is in the report that the PSCRB was very supportive of the use of that violence reduction grant. And I think that that's kudos. Thank you.
Okay, I think Councilmember Ward and Emig.
Thank you for this report. It was good reading, and it's good to hear you summarize it and have a chance to respond. I did just have a couple of questions. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of consultation the police department sought from the PSCRB prior to creating the strategic plan?
So I believe before the strategic plan, and the timing might be off here, so anyone can correct me if I'm wrong back there, but I believe that we were presented with the strategic plan prior to City Council seeing the strategic plan. And so it's just a discussion, basically a presentation and discussion, like opportunity for us to ask questions that we might have.
But in terms of prior to that meeting and that presentation to the PSCRB, was the PSCRB asked to provide any input on the plan?
That sort of was the opportunity for input.
Okay. And what about with the violence reduction grant money and how that would be spent, the $500,000? Was the PSCRB involved in that, in creating that list?
In creating it, no, but it was presented to us again before it came before City Council. So we raised questions, any issues we had or concerns. We asked questions about. We did not take a vote on it because it was not an agenda item. So we weren't able to take a vote on that to see if there was approval overall of the board. But I would say that generally the board thought that there were some very positive things on there. I remember specifically, like the gun safes, for example, I thought was a great idea. The youth program that was proposed. So in general, I think the things that we had the most questions about were the acquisition of the UAVs, the drones.
So,
And those questions were answered at that time.
yeah. I mean, would you see it as the role of the PSCRB to provide consultation before a plan like that? Either of those plans are formalized?
I guess my short answer would be yes, only because when we talk about the police community relationship, those are obviously things that impact the community. And so
you'd
sorry.
welcome that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like I said, Chief Symington came before us, before he came before City Council to give us that presentation and to answer any questions we had.
Thanks.
Okay, Councilmember Emig.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the presentation, Dr. Farmer, and I do appreciate all of the service that you're providing. The question I have, the first two are pretty logistical. For a while, we could have access to live stream meetings, and that was really great. And I would make a pitch for having online access post-meeting if possible, just because I know a lot of folks would be really interested in the conversation and might reach out to members of the PSCRB based on those meetings. I believe too, the charter dictates that the board shall consist of 9 members, and you're short of that.
Mhm.
So it kind of behooves all of us perhaps to recruit community members to participate so that you can have a full board representing. And finally, just a question related to your charter. One of your goals is to identify perceived deficiencies in police community relationships. And writ large, you're a citizen advisory committee. So if you had any recommendations for this council in terms of how you might be more effective in either one of those capacities, what would you tell us so that we could help make that a reality?
What a question. So I think one thing, like I said, is that whenever we've requested information from BPD, they've been very forthcoming. So just to give an example, I know when the board was created, I wasn't an original member of the board, right? But I know when the board was created, there was a lot of discussion about, will we get to see all of the complaints? Can we have input on all complaints, et cetera, right? And so one of the things that has changed since I've been a member of the board is, as mentioned, is the action item biannual review of complaints that have been filed. And essentially what this is we get redacted complaints that Assistant Chief Wamsley takes great care and time in putting together for the board at least a couple of times a year. And that's just all the complaints to date, not necessarily the complaints that have been appealed. So if any complaints could be appealed to the PSCRB, they're not included. If anything is awaiting adjudication, it's not included. But that was just a request we made for information from BPD that they happily obliged. So we do get to see all complaints. And the purpose of that is just for the educational component. Again, we're able to ask questions about policy and procedure, which, to be honest, has really clarified a lot of things in terms of police practice and things like that, right? Now, I suppose if we had something like that more formalized, so that in the future, if that became an issue, it was a part of the board's, what they're supposed to do inherently, I guess. But like I said, BPD has just been very forthcoming with that information, so that wasn't necessary. And again, that is part of the community outreach and educational efforts of the board is what that falls under. So the reason that we're looking at the complaints is, oh, it's interesting that you do this. Can you explain more about what that policy or procedure is? And then that gives us better leverage if the community has questions to be able to answer them when any of those questions come up. So it's been a really great practice, I think, that has provided us a lot of education on police practice and policies and procedures there.
Thank you. Kudos to the BPD.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Becker.
Thank you very much for your presentation and all your hard work, all of you. Just a couple comments and really to acknowledge the good work, both on the committee and on the police force. Everything I've heard you say is different than a narrative that I often hear outside of Bloomington, and that is there's 100% cooperation. Every time an issue has been brought up, you've gotten good resolution in a transparent way. Any issue, you mentioned the traffic stop disparity, we're trending in the right direction. And every issue that's been reviewed during my time that I'm aware of has been documented as BPD has followed the process. So I think it's really good to say that you guys are working well with BPD, which is awesome, because that means the community's input is getting to you and to BPD, and it's all being receptively taken, no defensiveness. And then also it's saying that our police force is doing as good or better of a job as really anywhere around with the way they're responding and supporting you. So great job, guys.
Thank you. Last but not least.
Just a quick apology, Dr. Farmer, for not calling you Dr. Farmer. Thanks.
I didn't even notice.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just, I guess, maybe reiterate, but I want to say thank you for your service on the board and chairing it. I know sometimes chairing something requires a little bit more time and preparation, so we appreciate that. I want to say thank you to the board members for their service as well. I think this board is working the way it was intended initially, is to, one, provide a sounding board for the community, in order to raise whatever questions and issues that they have. As we've always said, nobody's perfect, but so long as we have avenues to discuss the concerns that we have, I think it's great, and I'm very pleased. Not that I expected anything different, but I think it's good that it's been demonstrated that the police department is collaborative, cooperative with the board as well. So thank you all very much to the board, police department, for the great work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Okay. With that said, we're going to move on to the next item, which is the city manager's discussion.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I believe I have 2 slides before we get into new hires and promotions. Miller Park Zoo, this coming Saturday, the 25th, learn about Butterflies Day at the Miller Park Zoo. And I'm not sure what the times are, but I'm sure we can find that in the website. And we'll be continuing the messaging throughout the week. Next slide. Summer fun, the Parks and Rec summer programs and classes is out. And resident registration starts on April 12th, non-resident April 19th. Please go to bloomingtonparks.org to see the program for the summer. And then next slide. I think we're into new hires, yes. Matt Hurley, engineering tech, public works. London was hired as a public safety dispatcher. Gail was hired community enhancement inspector. Kelly was hired as a food and beverage manager at the arena at the Coliseum. Nick was hired as a laborer for public works. Donovan was hired as with the Bloomington Fire Department. Next slide. Internal promotions. Jake was hired, was promoted up to a truck driver position with solid waste. And Alyssa was promoted up as a city planner in the ECD department. And then Glenn was a transfer out of the ECD department and took a promotion within IT as our GIS coordinator. Were there more, Catherine? Yep, 2 more. Matt Hurley, engineering tech with public works, and Maria was promoted up into the payroll and timekeeping manager position in HR. And then no additional comments, Mayor. I am done.
Okay, awesome. Well, I have butterflies in my stomach because, oh, darn.
And I knew there was one more, and I can feel the clerk staring bullets at me. Just wanted to let the community know that our outdoor dining permit applications will be available on the website on Wednesday. Thanks.
I know, which is a great sign of things to come, better weather. Okay, with that, and no butterflies in my stomach, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, okay. And all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned. See you not next Monday.